Are we looking at the end of the International Criminal Court? That it does seem very likely, at least when it comes to pretty much doing anything necessary because of the American sanctions, because of the sanctions put on by Donald Trump, the American president. The both the Karim Khan, the chief prosecutor, and many of the people working for him are pretty much unable to really travel. Many of them are unable to sort of use their emails if they are using American companies because the American companies don't want to get sanctioned. And yeah, it really does seem like it's sort of like slowly dissolving. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the sexual scandal that has been happening around Karim Khan, which I think some people are saying that the whole reason why he even started going after the Israeli leaders was to sort of cover that up. So we'll discuss a little bit of that. And then I think we'll definitely have time discuss the past actions from the ICC, specifically how they went after Israel or after Israeli politicians. And generally, what the hell is the point of this court? Joining me today are Marco and Richard. Welcome to the reality show. So yeah, I mean, the first thing is that they have been sanctioned by the U.S. So especially it's something that apparently is true that American staffers that so ICC is in Hague in Netherlands, right?
Yeah.
That was the country. So American staffers that have been working there, they are risking arrest if they travel back to the U.S. Unless they basically leave their job. Uh, Marco, what do you make of this step? And yeah, what do you generally make of this situation?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, the US administration has effectively set out a series of sanctions which would hit anyone going after, from the ICC, going after Israel, and specifically Netanyahu and was it Gallant? Yeah. Um, because, as we know, last November, they issued a warrant in order to trial them for alleged genocide and all this kind of stuff. So the sanctions effectively would stop anyone who's working on the who's only working or helping or being involved at all in the proceeding that the ICC is carrying out against what would be Americans' allies or interests and this kind of stuff. So it's quite a broad set of sanction, which has kind of frightened all the bureaucrats in The Hague, meaning that potentially, if they were found to be helping in any way Karim Khan or his lackeys at the ICC, they would be liable to arrest, or certainly they wouldn't be allowed to get to the United States. And because lots of the staff working at the ICC are actually Americans, they tend to use lots of consultants, if you like, people who are not directly employed by the ICC as such. So there are lots of Americans there, and some Americans, some people are actually left on not working on their on the ICC stuff, try just in case they were to fall foul of these sanctions. Now, this is that really spell. This means that some of the procedures that the ICC is involved in are actually being seriously impaired, or some things cannot go ahead. But does this mean the end of the ICC? Well, it would be like wishing the end of religion, wouldn't it? There's always going to be some spineless, pointless, cowardly politicians like Pedro Sanchez or our prime minister who will always believe in the ICC and the international law. So no, I don't think the ICC is finished as such. But you can only dream.
Yeah, I want to say yes, it's finished. And I want to say yes, it's finished because it should be finished. It shouldn't be started in the first place. And I want to say yes, it's finished because I do think the attitude of the US could spell the end of it, but there's a whole load of caveats to that, and I'll get to those in a minute. First of all, the both the US and Israel aren't members of this court, aren't signed up to its jurisdiction. And this is actually acting like you don't agree with you don't recognize its jurisdiction. So for the first time, you've actually got a country as big as America, with the clout of America, the moral import of America, the leadership of the free world, etc., actually saying we're actually acting on this. We're acting on the fact that this jurisdiction is not valid, and that is a big mark in its favour at this point, and that is a big mark against the ICC within the eyes of so many. So that is great to see. But of course, it's all a bit muddled in the way it's being done, and of course, the principles upon which it's being done. Where the principles should be, it shouldn't exist at all, regardless of what it's adjudicating on. Then that would be much clearer, and that would be my preference, as opposed to this impression is given that it's because US and its ally Israel, its close friend Israel, could do literally whatever they want, and therefore we don't recognise the ICC because of that. Now that is not the same thing, I think it's important to make that clear. But of course, will it spell the end of it? No. I mean, I think Marco's point there. There's so many people who are prepared to give it their sanction. There are so many countries that treat this body as if it's super important. I mean, we've got a leader here in the UK who is essentially, is a former human rights lawyer who's now the prime minister of the country. Well, with the likes of that reaching the top of government in a country like the UK, what hope is there of showing support to the US on this matter? And of course, the UK does sign up to these things. It often, sits on the fence and abstains in many ways, like it does at the UN often. But that's neither here nor there. It still offers its sanction too often. But it would be nice to think that this was a move towards getting rid of things like the ICC, getting rid of things like the UN, and America taking the lead on saying we're not giving these supranational bodies and these illegitimate bodies our sanction anymore. But there's a heavy element of I wish that would last now and beyond this single administration anyway, because it could of course be undone by another administration unless it was understood by the culture, by the people within the US, why it was a bad thing in the first place, as opposed to thinking that everybody can get around the table, friend or foe, dictator or free nation, and come up with some compromise of how to rule the world.
We have a super chat from PC. Thank you so much. He says it's a kangaroo court. And, even that is sort of like giving it too much credit because, I'm a big fan of the EU overall. But one thing that I think is terrible about the EU or any sort of almost any international organization is the fact that there are representatives in the EU Parliament, and I never fucking hear from them. I never hear. I for the most part, I don't even remember who is actually there representing like the different parties in Slovakia. I barely know which parties are actually there because once they go there, you never hear from them. And if there is anything different about the UN, is the fact that you absolutely have no idea who's there. You have, whatever country you're from, you have somebody there representing you at the UN General Assembly. Maybe you have somebody representing you at the Security Council. You have people representing you in the UN Human Rights Council. There is a Slovak in the ICJ. I've never heard about him. I have no idea how he got there. And this is, Richard, you talked about legitimacy. When we have a nation, legitimacy should be from the consent of the government. There should be some mechanism where you sort of there is like you have like people who are responsible towards the population. And the further you remove it from, the more it's becoming sort of like illegitimate. Now, in certain cases, it's good. When you have like the Supreme Court in the US, you don't elect them, you elect people who then pick the Supreme Court justices. It's a different function, and I think it still works well enough. But the fact is, nobody knows, unless you really look into it, you have no idea how people are picked into the Human Rights Council or the Security Council or the General Assembly. So we have these people who basically don't really answer to anybody, don't really have any Although, well, technically they respond to their like representatives in the country, but you never hear, and you don't even know like what happens when there is like a general assembly. Like a normal person has no idea what it even includes. So we have this sort of like a separate institutions that do have basically can technically have a lot of power, right? Like when the ICC gives out a criminal arrest warrant, for example, Netanyahu, technically he cannot travel across the EU right now. Basically, I'm not sure if he did ended up going into Hungary or okay, so he went into Hungary, and Hungary has basically said Hungary, who is a signatory to ICC, has basically said that they wouldn't do anything, they wouldn't arrest him, and they didn't. So, but there is a question about the rest of them, right? So you have this body that both doesn't really have control because has no enforcement mechanism. It's not like they have their own police or their own army that they can enforce, but also does seem to have a lot of power. So yeah, you just have this institution that is like that is the problem of it. It's like so not I don't even want to say corrupt because that even is giving like it can't like it's by design it's broken. Like it cannot be not corrupt. It cannot like take certain steps towards not being sort of in this like terrible situation. Marco?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can. First of all, I'm not a fan of the EU, um, but these institutions are big in order to protect themselves. Effectively, a super state, a state which is not assailable by the little people, not assailable by the people who should be in charge and able to remove their mandates from these people. That's why we got somebody like the president of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, who's a convicted criminal. She has a conviction, and of course, her punishment was nothing, because she's an important person, so she didn't get a punishment. And then we have here in Britain, for example, a judge from the International Criminal Tribunal, a UN judge, has just been convicted for slavery. She was keeping a slave. She's Ugandan, and she was holding a Ugandan slave in her house, working for her. I mean, these things occur all the time because these institutions are so big, so complex, so removed from any kind of direct control from the people who should be able to give them legitimacy, that they can do what they want. And they know that, and that's what they count on. That's why the WHO was quite happy to, again, in another UN institution, was quite happy to support the lockdowns and prop them and provide information to any state who was wavering. The WHO would prop them up and say, yeah, go ahead, do a good lockdown. We like to imprison people in their own homes. We like to tread all over the few individual rights that are left and the few protection in place. So, and again, the International Criminal Court, the ICC, is it's propped up by its own victims. Effectively, it's given sanction by the very states that decide to sign up to it. And of course, when you say states sign up to it, it's a bunch of politicians who want to have their fingers in the pie. They just do it for their own self-preservation, really. It doesn't really do any good to anyone to have an international criminal court, because all it does is press itself to political intervention and machination in the background. That's why the EU is the UN is so all over it all. And again, international law. I mean, international law is not a thing. The international law only works within a country that makes it and upholds it, protects it, and make it followed. Can you imagine an international law which includes Sharia law, Chinese Communist Party law, and proper common law, West, the kind of respect for the rule of law there is in the West? I don't think so. And that's why by making memoranda or understanding and international signatory, international agreements, this kind of concept of international law is created. But it's as vacuous as the people who pretend to uphold it.
I think this is a classic example, really, of the sort of mixed economy or mixed premises thinking that you're seeing, on the big stage. Because really, the answer to this what seems like a big tricky dilemma with lots of complicated legal ramifications and inferences is actually simple, isn't it? The court shouldn't exist in the first place. The UN shouldn't exist in the first place. That's the simple way of looking at it. But because people partly agree with some things, some bodies do sometimes, that they therefore overlook the fact that it exists at all when it shouldn't. And for example, it's very easy to draw like the wrong conclusions from what we're seeing here. I mean, say for example that country X with leader Y is a country you don't like, is a country you don't unimpressed by at the moment, and therefore you're happy to see some supranational body bypass it because you don't like country X under leader Y at the moment. But then, the leadership changes, and you do want, your laws to be returned, or your ability to control things to be returned to your country because you've now got the leader you like. You're not using principle there at all. You're just trying to use by force, in order to get your own way, a supranational body instead of the elected body within your country. And you should be making the case at home, and you should be arguing based on the principles, and you should be holding the leaders that you elect to the principles they're elected by. And the other kind of things that people infer wrongly from a lot of this, they make draw the wrong conclusions from it. For example, like Marco referred to earlier, the fact that this particular court, the ICC, has just 900, I say just, 900 people working for it, and that they use a lot of external contractors. And the fact that these sanctions are working is because of the external contractors who also do other work for all sorts of other people are concerned that, Trump sanctions will therefore hit them, and therefore they're withdrawing their assistance to the ICC. Now, some people would draw from that situation the fact that they shouldn't use external contractors. They should have a bigger staff. So they don't have to use external contractors, so that they can be a stronger body that can't be touched by any government, can't be touched by anyone anywhere. But of course, that's the wrong inference to draw. That is just to give an unaccountable body even more power to override the individual rights of countless citizens all over the place who have no ability to defend themselves against it, so long as that would be the conclusion that you draw. So that makes it super complicated, but the easy answer is can the thing.
Yeah, and I think what has to be understood about sort of like the complicated part, because there is a place for complicated. Not every layman needs to understand sort of I don't know what's like nuclear physics to sort of for us to be able to have sort of like nuclear, what you call them, like nuclear. What do you call them?
Energy?
What?
Nuclear energy?
Yeah. Like not everybody needs to understand it to like have nuclear energy because, well, first of all, it should be handled by private companies. And yeah, then when you have this sort of like international conglomerates that are sort of like private business, not everybody needs to understand it because they are doing their own thing as a private company. The problem with this is they have a unique power, or well, technically they don't, but because it's like this split issue, right? When a government does something, a layman needs to understand it. When a crime happens in America, sort of that is a criminal, and you go to the court, you have to be convicted by 12 people, 12 of your peers. You need to be able to explain the laws to a layman, and they need to be able to convict them. If you cannot explain that law to laymen, that maybe is a law that shouldn't be there in the first place. If there is a law that is too complicated, such as antitrust, where there is no standard, there is no way to avoid it, whatever action you take as a company can suddenly break antitrust laws, and there is no ability to follow it. So that's an improper law that should never be on the books. And in a similar way, when we talk about ICC, when you wage war, there is no way to really uphold the whatever international law is. Not to mention the fact that, like you said earlier, right? Israel is not even a signatory to the ICC. So, but somehow ICC still has a jurisdiction because Palestinian authorities sort of like signed by it. But even then, what can just whatever law is passed now you suddenly have to uphold by it? It is truly impossible. It's completely separated from being an independent nation that is not even being independent nation that is able to uphold or do whatever they want, being a rational nation doing what is necessary for its protection. That is impossible under not the international law or whatever that means, by whatever treaties somebody somewhere accepts, and then everybody else has to uphold them. It makes it impossible. So that it has no right to exist. It has no way of really being improper. I cannot imagine being like a judge at the ICC or ICJ. I have no idea how I would like rule or anything because of like it's a war. How do you, maybe in like special cases of genocide you can, but when is this war? It's clearly you are doing something improper, especially if the other side completely doesn't uphold it. Hamas breaks all parts of all the international treaties. How can you go after Israel when the other side is not upholding them in any way? The only way to do it is to be biased against Israel, is to go after Israel specifically. And anything to add to Marco? We can go to the sexual thing now, but anything to add in the meantime?
No, I think the more you go there.
I think I would just add just a comment on Trump, really, because this is the downside of him. There are many downsides, of course, but this is the downside of the approach, is that this feels like a whim-based, petulant emperor who decides you're blacklisted and then says, no, I'm not dealing with you anymore. And of course, if where that is the approach, that doesn't distinguish between somebody who has a legitimate reason to be ignored or to be, blacklisted, as it were, to be not dealt with in the future, and somebody who is just the result of a petulant whim. And of course, it doesn't make it clear to anyone watching what the difference is. This just looks like, oh, it's just Trump lashing out again, and this time he's lashing out at the ICC. This is the US administration lashing out at the ICC, when this is a good case where the ICC shouldn't exist, and it should be emphasized on a principle basis why it shouldn't exist, and then it's not lashing out. It's pointing out why that's connected with all the other principles that you stand for as a country, and you have recognized within your constitution.
We have a few questions from Bonnie in the chat. She's asking, wouldn't real international law require an objective common standard which doesn't exist? Just the idea of international law implies sovereign nations shouldn't exist. I think, international law in itself is like an anti-concept. There is no thing. When people talk about international law, they talk about different sort of treaties, Geneva Conventions. There's many of them, and then there's like, I think there's like 7 or 8 different documents overall when it comes to Geneva Conventions. And there are things written there about how to fight the war, how to why there are sort of like special protections for, let's say, medical staff or journalists and all that. How do you, let's say, if you want to strike a hospital, what are the obligations on both sides, both the belligerent and sort of the both belligerents, what they are supposed to do? And so that's all it is, right? That's what it means. And I think it is sort of improper by itself, because one, calling it law is insane. Law needs to be objective. It needs to be one. You cannot have like competing laws inside. Let's say America, for example, you cannot have like competing laws. So you cannot have like one ruling, or rather, when there is sort of like a uncertainty, you have the Supreme Court at the end to basically decide, no, this is what the law actually is. This is what is actually true. Otherwise, you just have a civil war. If you have like a Sharia law in one town, or like in one sort of like, or in the same town, if you have like Sharia law and the Western law and just a bunch of anarchists, it's a is just anarchy unless you have that body at the top that basically enforces. No, this is actually what needs to happen when you have the police, when you have the courts. So when we talk about this international thing, and I think Bonnie's second question was, what does it mean? Or what means does the ICC have to enforce its verdicts? Nothing really. What should happen, or ideally should happen, according to ICJ and ICC, is that countries. So when Israel was accused in the ICJ, they went to the court. When it comes to ICC, Netanyahu should give himself up and have the sort of trial. Now, trials at the ICC can also happen without the people present, as I think has happened in the past. But then again, unless you have somebody enforcing it, so the other way to do it is basically when you have an ICC signatory, like the country itself should give them up, or when they go to some countries, those countries should give them up. So if Putin, who also has warrants against him, comes to Poland or Hungary or America or whatever, he should be, well, not America because not a signatory, but he should be arrested, or the UK, for example, he should be arrested and should be given up. Now, again, that sort of relies on the actual law, on the actual people who can enforce law, which are the individual nations. Anything to add, or should we go?
No, I'm happy to move on to the next aspect of it.
Yeah, so there is, of course, the whole thing that there was basically there's a sexual scandal against Karim Khan. I should correct myself. He is just a prosecutor of the ICC, not a chief prosecutor. I made a mistake. So basically what is happening is some women came out basically saying he has been sexually harassing them. One Malaysian lawyer in her 30s has asked to meet him at some point. He summoned her in the suit and apparently improperly touched her, and that has been going for months. One of the things she claimed, or the reason why she didn't speak out for a long time, was that she was afraid that it would impede the sort of the actions of the ICC, and apparently even Karim Khan, again, reportedly, that's just what we've heard from the victim, saying, think about the Palestinian arrest warrants, he said to her at some point. And so there is a whole speculation about if the reason that Karim Khan came out or came up after Israel was to basically escape these charges, since apparently, well, one, we never see these people sort of get punished for anything. But if he is viewed as some sort of like, this is the guy who is going after Israel, this is the guy who is doing, the people at the UN have an incentive to not investigate him, to not do anything about him. And even the investigations that they do, we've seen the investigations against UNRWA, nothing bad happened. So yeah, you have this whole thing. Again, I don't think that sort of that this is like the most important thing to focus on. I think the system is corrupt in itself. The fact that it allows for something like this, the fact that something like this is possible, is just, I think, a byproduct of an organization like this. Marco?
Yeah, well, first of all, we should say that these are just allegations at this point. There's an investigation, a live investigation right now, and probably it's going to be followed by a whitewash. But that's all suggestion at the moment. And to be honest, it's also a distraction. I don't care if this guy is very corrupt. It's nothing new. Even if he were guilty of whatever he's done. Well, are we surprised? People in those kind of position think they are untouchable in virtue of their own, role and the fact that they got behind these big institutions. That's why that member of the International Crime Court I mentioned earlier on, the Ugandan woman, was quite happy to keep a slave and claim immunity when the police came and knocked at the door. So these places are effectively states on steroids, are states sanctioned by states, and they are effectively designed to squash over individual rights. They haven't got any interest in uphold proper law, because law should be, as you mentioned, they should be objective, i.e., design in order to protect people's rights, in a way that makes sure that people do not step over other people's rights. That's what the rule of law is. If there is an instance where there is some kind of disagreement within people, you should have a court that's able to decide objectively based on proper principles in law, who was right, who's wrong, who's in the right, who's in the wrong, and what kind of remedial action has to be taken. And of course, in case of crime, it's quite obvious that the person who commits a crime should be punished, and the victim should be protected. So, and that's what we mean for objective laws. It's not the scandal. And in a way, also that's why the common law that we have in the Anglo-Saxon world, which is more based more on the idea of the individual right. It all stems from the Magna Carta Declaration in 1215. So there is a chasm between the common law in the Anglo-Saxon world and the laws which are, for example, in Europe, where there are codes that tell you what you can do, and anything else is forbidden unless is allowed. It's the opposite in common law. In common law, you're free to do roughly what you want, unless it's prohibited. So there's a massive difference between the two worlds. And that's why the UK was never sitting comfortably in the EU. There was a philosophical grinding there that was never resolved, because the EU is a massive state who wants to impose a regulation, all this kind of stuff, and that's why it's kind of grinding to a halt economically as well. But yeah, and the fact that these things are open to political abuse. We've seen the case against Israel is purely political. The ICC talks about the state of Palestine, which is a fiction in two level of fictions. So, I mean, this whole accusation of any wrongdoing on the part of Netanyahu and Gallant are just based on hearsay. It's just slander. It's all, again, part of the propaganda that's carry on against Israel, to make up for the physical military disparity between the two sides. So Hamas is allowed to attack Israel. Hamas is always protected by people going into the streets and chanting slogans, and they're allowed to do it. When somebody else does something similar on the other spectrum, they usually are picked up, police and things like that. So it's all, even at the ICC level, we see this disparity, this unfairness, the two tiers, if you like, applied, even in what should be something as objective as law.
I mean, if you take, just before I get on to the stuff about the sexual allegations and whatnot, if you take that UN case that Marco is talking about, the UN judge there, the Ugandan one, that's in the UK. So this UN judge in the UK has been jailed for holding a slave in the UK because it's against the law of the UK to hold a slave. Problem solved. No international court required for that piece of justice to be seen through. Of course, despite the fact she tries to claim immunity and obviously failed and was convicted and sent to jail. So that's the process working exactly how it should, and it becomes quite evident that justice is still achieved without the need for any I keep saying supernatural, but they feel supernatural to me. They feel imaginary. They feel as a fantasy, as a unicorn or a second reality, but a supranational body. I think one of the things when it comes to the allegations and stuff, I think confusing the individual character of a post holder with the legitimacy of the post is the problem here. Because the moral character of a post holder in a legitimate post, that's something to consider. but it becomes a secondary redundant factor when the post itself is irrelevant and should be wiped out at the root, which is clearly what should be the case here. I mean, the only thing it's relevant to, in the sense, is the illusion that's built up that organisations like the ICC are somehow pure and perfect and the absolute moral ideal we should all aspire to, and all that kind of thing. And of course, this does kind of puncture that illusion whenever these kind of cases start to crop up and appear within the news. Of course, we don't exactly know where the allegations are going to go at this point, but already that has some effect. So I think it's irrelevant in many levels, but also it is important to recognise that a lot of what is being judged at the moment is not being judged based on reason and rationality as it should be. It's being based on loose emotion, loose feelings, a sense of, oh, these are the good people, these sit above governments and therefore, they make the right decisions. And it's similarly true, and we'll probably talk about it in a second maybe, but the other arguments that are made for keeping the ICC, which is things like, well, it's doing some good work in other areas. Like Sudan, for example, it's trying to pursue a case against Omar al-Bashir in Sudan, and should it not be allowed to pursue that work because of the crimes that he is causing, has been causing to his country. So again, you've got to make sure that you recognise that whether you like a particular case or you don't like a particular case is irrelevant. The thing shouldn't exist.
Yeah, and somebody in the chat says Khan's brother is already a convicted rapist. I checked it, and actually it is not that sort of like same blood automatically damns the whole family. Although something I was surprised about, his brother apparently he was convicted of sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy, and he got 18 months for it and was released after serving 9, months. Did I say years? I meant months. So that seems definitely disturbing as a really low. But yeah, I guess whatever. That completely threw me off. So yeah, I mean,
just to extend that, I mean, the problem he's British, isn't he? Presumably, certainly Karim Khan is British, so presumably his brother is. And in the UK
was
at
an
the
MP
moment,
also.
right. Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah. No, I do remember vaguely now. Yes, that's right. I think the problem in the UK is that the whole justice system is not operating properly. They're now talking about letting out prisoners after merely serving a third of their term, simply because of the lack of prison space and the fact that they're not managing the system properly enough and ensuring that that money is spent sensibly, which is one area where it should be spent, is keeping the population safe from those that are convicted of crimes, and therefore they're releasing people, as well as, of course, putting people through the courts and sending them to jail for things like tweets and the like. So all of that is a distortion of where justice should exist and should exist properly and should be applied objectively and appropriately. And of course, all of it fits into that context, which is the other part of the puzzle. It's easy to concentrate only on these external bodies and miss some of the problems taking place within our own nations where justice is not being served.
Yeah, and sort of about proper justice. Again, the people who say we cannot go after Karim Khan because, yeah, what's happening in Sudan, or because they are going after those people. You have to realize that when, let's say, a judge is convicted of corruption or something like that happens, that puts like a scary eye on all the cases he ever did. If there is somebody who is able to be corrupted, who is corrupt, that should bring to your attention everything they ever did. So if somebody is already and again, as we've said, it's sort of, this is just alleged, it's getting sort of like looked into. But if he gets convicted, if something happens, or if there is even a chance, the fact that your sort of focus is not, okay, has he ever been sort of like correct, or shouldn't be careful about everything, is no, we just need to sort of ignore that, so these things that he's going after are still being sort of are being went after. You don't actually care about justice. You just cared about some vindication or some, going after specific people, because justice needs to be done objectively and all across the board, not just some people. So yeah, I mean, what else can we bring up? I mean, I should bring up the sort of like the ICC from the past, or specifically how they, just so people remember after the first arrest warrants came up. So there were arrest warrants for Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, Yoav Gallant, the then Minister of Defense. But also, Sinwar and Haniyeh and Dave, the leader of Gaza, the leader of Hamas, and Mohammed Dave was, I think, what was he at the time? He was like the leader of Al-Aqsa Brigades, or just a commander. I can check later just to confirm. And so, we are being objective. We are being, we are going after those people. We are going after those people. Again, trying to, and this is the goal of these international organizations, trying to say that the leaders of Hamas who orchestrated October 7, that went after innocents, and not even just October 7, all the crimes of the past, and Netanyahu, who is defending his nation, Yoav Gallant, who is defending his nations, those are on the same scale. Again, brings the corruption. Now, arrest warrants for Sinwar and Haniyeh were, of course, taken, since they are no longer on this earth. But there is still arrest warrant for Deif, who is also dead, but they don't confirm it, so...
I think it's been cancelled about a month ago or something as
Oh,
well.
for Dave? Okay.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, anything to add on this point, Marco?
Yeah, well, the whole case that the ICC is trying to, well, has done, is based on the fact that Israel is allegedly not allowing humanitarian aid in Gaza, which is, I mean, we said how idiotic this idea is in the first place, but the point is that the main reason why the warrant has been issued is because of the crime against humanity that Netanyahu and Gallant allegedly committed, but we ignores the fact that actually the famine has been announced so many times, and with such a fanfare, it's never actually happened, never occurred. Supplies are still going to Gaza. Only today I saw a picture of a UNICEF van with supplies outside a shopping mall in Gaza City. So that's a kind of terrible conditions that the Palestinians live under. So the whole warrant, the whole case is bogus. It's just politically motivated. It's so incredibly whimsical and non-objective that it just begs belief that actually these people went out of the way in order to take the actions that they took. And that's talks so much about their own institution. And the assumption is that, because in this day and age, the state is seen as the supreme good, something which is a superstate has got to be super good. So the bigger this institution are, the more moral credit they seem to cash in, and which is the totally opposite, because the state, again, the only purpose of the state is to guarantee the safety and the individual rights of the citizens that live in it, nothing else.
And by that same false and wrong credo, private companies are viewed as the bottom of the pile. They're viewed as bad. So when Microsoft, for example, as in the course of this particular case, decides to cancel Karim Khan's email address because it doesn't want, implications for going against the sanctions of the US, it's accused of, all sorts of things. And that's, a private company like Microsoft can choose to allow emails for whoever they do or don't wish to allow them to under their own, decision making. You're not guaranteed an email from anyone, and that's quite clear within your terms and conditions. I think one of the things that is interesting to note is some of the history here. Like back in 2020, for example, was when Trump sanctioned the predecessor to Karim Khan who was pursuing a case against the US about what the military did in Afghanistan during their when they operated in the country for many years, and of course. It was Joe Biden who rescinded those sanctions the moment he came into office. Now, if you were demonstrating throughout that this court has no legitimacy, and you were linking what's happening now with what you yourself did, I mean Trump here, back in 2020, and saying, look, Afghanistan was the case regarding Afghanistan was an example of the same thing. This is an example of the same thing. This court is illegitimate. It's illegitimate. We're not talking about it. It's irrelevant. Then that would hold so much more weight and so much more moral clout, and would help people see what the right from wrong. Because none of this, let's be clear, none of this prevents anyone calling out a dictator. It doesn't prevent any leader of any country saying Putin is wrong, or Kim Jong-un is wrong, or it doesn't prevent any of that occurring. It doesn't prevent any of the ostracizing that can be done of a country by the leaders of another country, particularly if they've been elected and are making their moral case on that basis. So it's not removing the ability for people to judge right and wrong. It's removing the ability of people to adjudicate from afar with no accountability and no legitimacy and no moral basis to do so.
Yeah, I mean, as you, I think, nicely stated, we can go after these people without these sort of bodies, and not even without these bodies. These bodies prohibit us to go after these people rather than anything else, because they do not have any ability to go after them. Any ability they gain is again through the sanction of some of the states. Anything that happens from the UN Security Council is by the sanction of the 5 permanent members. They need to agree and they need to participate in that. And even when they do, they don't do shit. We had the sort of the forces in the south of Lebanon. I didn't do nothing about their mission. We had the forces in Egypt, in Sinai, and they simply went away when Egypt asked them because they wanted to invade Israel. So again, these international bodies, they do not have any power, and they are not capable. By definitionally, they cannot be able. You cannot have any international body that is able to yield the power unless they have some stake. They have no stake. They have empty hands. They cannot do anything. So sort of trying to act as they do is simply impeding any sort of justice. And yeah, even then, when we talk about Western countries, when we talk about civilized countries, they do take care of their corruption. They do take care of their infringements of individual rights. That's why those are the good countries, or at least they try to the best to sort of the best philosophy that is currently in that society. But when it comes to dictatorships, when it comes to authoritarian nations, they have no desire to uphold them, no matter if it's some whatever you want to talk about international law. They simply have no desire to do anything like that. That's why you don't have any sort of Palestinian human rights organizations that talk about the infringement of Palestinian government on the Palestinian rights. It's all about Israeli infringement of for the rights of Palestinians. Marco, any last thoughts, and where can people find you?
Yeah, as you said, I mean, these organizations do not hold any power apart from the power given by the people who are submitting themselves to their, to their perceived power, and this is just it's just a reflection of how our politicians, how countries are effectively run, what the kind of ideas that are prevalent in our societies. When you think that you should submit but by default, your citizen to the whim of this institution that can be so easily captured politically. Well, you declare emphatic war against your own people, aren't you? You're declaring, let's do away with individual rights because a bigger state will have a better view of how to rule people. It's just preposterous. And again, the further away you go from self-determination of a population that decide which kind of government and how to run its own government, the more you're creating a bunch of slaves, really. And the kind of institution we see prospering right now are the kind of institution that represent the mixed economy. They represent the moving away from the founding fathers' ideas of protection of individual rights, and they codifying them into a document like the Constitution.
And of course, bodies like the ICC rely constantly on the attitude of international solidarity, I think is the phrase they use. Now, the word solidarity is one that makes me shudder because it always means compromising with enemies. It always means a lefty compromise with the worst elements in the world, and you must stand together, and the standing together is more important than who you're standing together with. And that's what the solidarity is calling for in this case. And I think this is why the US making a clear stance is an important factor, because it's the US. I think the quote from them that I've heard is that from the US administration is that the charge of malign conduct, in inverted commas, threatens the and undermines the critical national security and foreign policy work of the US government. And it does have an impact on all of the forces and troops working all over the place when these accusations are made in an illegitimate court by an illegitimate body that then puts the lives at risk of soldiers all across the world doing the important work that's needed. So are we moving in the right direction? I don't know. I don't believe so, to be honest. I believe sadly, this is just a blip, but it's a blip that we ought to shine a spotlight on and explain why it shouldn't be a blip.
And where can people find you?
People can find some of the work we do on the Briefly Objective, the sister channel to this. The link is in the description below for short form material with added visuals on all the key elements, particularly in the Israel situation at the moment. So please check it out, like and subscribe. Thank you.
And with that, thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you everybody for watching. We'll see you tomorrow with another episode of the Daily Objective and the reality show. And also today, there is the Constitution course with James Valiant. That's in 1 hour, but that's for Reardon Metal members on the website, as well as Midas Mulligan members on the website, but also Inner Circle members on YouTube. So you can become one on YouTube, and you can also watch it live. If you become a member on the website, Reardon Metal member, you can join the Zoom calls directly. That's in 1 hour. Thank you again, and bye-bye.